The moment my mother raised her champagne glass and smiled that smug little smile, I should have known something was coming. The way she clinked it so gently against my father's and leaned into the mic like she was about to deliver the final toast of the century, it felt off. The whole ballroom was filled with people I'd known my entire life. Teachers, neighbors, family friends, even my old soccer coach from middle school who hadn't spoken to me in a decade. And of course, my fiancée, Emily, sitting beside me in a dress she'd picked out with so much joy, completely unaware that our engagement night would become the origin story of the deepest betrayal I would ever endure. Before we raise our glasses, my mother began, her voice lilting with the fake warmth she always reserved for guests. Richard and I wanted to share a little secret about our son. The room chuckled politely. I remember looking at Emily, thinking maybe this was a funny story from my childhood. Maybe something adorable about my obsession with dinosaurs or how I once peed in a fountain at a family picnic. But the moment my dad looked down, unable to meet my eyes, the air shifted. You see, she continued, now smiling wider, Michael isn't actually our biological son. We adopted him when he was just a baby. For a second, it didn't register. I blinked, then blinked again. Laughter, confused, polite, hesitant, rippled through the room. Someone clapped. Someone else coughed. Emily's hand tightened around mine. And then the silence hit. My mother kept talking, saying something about how love transcends blood, how proud they were to raise me, but her words blurred into a buzzing in my ears. My chest tightened. My mouth was dry. The room spun just slightly. I stood up, slow and deliberate, every eye locking onto me. Excuse me, I said, voice calm but ice cold. I need some air. And I walked out. I didn't run. I didn't shout. I just left. Behind me, I heard Emily calling my name, but I kept walking through the marble hallways of the banquet hall, past the portraits of other people's legacies, and out into the biting night air. I remember standing under a flickering streetlight, hands clenched so tightly they trembled. For 28 years, I had lived a life built on a lie. A lie they decided to unwrap like a party favor. And for what? Applause? Sympathy? A dramatic twist to spice up the evening? I didn't go back inside. I didn't return Emily's texts. I didn't answer the 100 missed calls from my parents. That night, I drove. For hours. I ended up in a motel 3 towns over, staring at the ceiling, heart shattered, fury boiling beneath it. That was the moment I made the decision. I would vanish, cut them off, burn every bridge, and when I returned, it would be on my terms, in my time, with every secret they ever buried dragged into the daylight for the world to see. And the first person I would confront was the one I used to call Dad. The hardest part wasn't leaving, it was staying gone. I didn't just disappear from my parents' lives. I disappeared from everyone's. I changed my number, deleted every social account, quit my job, broke off the engagement, and boarded a one-way flight to Barcelona using the last of my savings. I left Emily a note, not because I didn't love her, but because I couldn't drag her into what I was about to become. I'm sorry, I wrote. This wasn't just about us. I need to find out who I am, and to do that, I need to go alone. For a while, I slept on couches, took out jobs, dishwashing, unloading boats, writing marketing copy for restaurants I could barely afford to eat at. My college degree sat in a box. My resume, useless. I was rebuilding from zero, and oddly, it felt like breathing again after years underwater. But every night before I closed my eyes, I'd see my mother's face, that triumphant little smirk, and I'd remember why I left. I wasn't just running. I was collecting strength, plotting clarity, waiting. It took 3 years before I returned to the States, not as Michael Carter, corporate strategist from Chicago, but as someone leaner, colder, quieter. I had changed, physically, emotionally. I'd studied law. I'd worked in journalism. I'd ghostwritten exposés under fake names. I had learned how secrets could be excavated, preserved, weaponized. And my parents? They had no idea. They still lived in the same house. My father had retired. My mother volunteered at church and sat on the board of a local foundation. I followed every move from afar. Hired someone to watch them discreetly. Tracked who they spent time with, which lawyers they used, where they moved their money. Because the truth was, the adoption reveal was only the tip of what they were hiding. I just didn't know how deep it went, until I found the safe deposit box. It was pure chance. The woman I hired, Evelyn, was reviewing property records when she stumbled across a joint box registered under a Shell LLC connected to my mother's name. The address was in a quiet banking building downtown. We staked it out for 2 weeks. When I finally paid a disgruntled ex-employee for the box's access history, my blood froze. The box had been visited twice a year, always by both parents, always in March and September, the same months as their wedding anniversary and my birthday. I couldn't access it directly, but I didn't need to, because a week later, Evelyn got inside. What she found? A stack of documents that changed everything. A letter from a woman named Judith Kane, handwritten, dated the week before my first birthday. It began with the words, "To Michael, if you ever find this." It wasn't just proof of adoption. It was proof that my biological mother had tried to reach out, and they never told me. She wasn't some anonymous figure in a file. She had a name, a past. She'd left a phone number, photos, even a small gold bracelet, the kind you put on an infant's wrist. My wrist. It was wrapped in tissue paper with the note. "He had this when I handed him to you. Please don't let him forget who he is." And they had buried it, locked it away like trash. My hands shook as I read it over and over, my chest heaving. They knew. All these years, they knew I had a mother out there, someone who cared enough to reach out, to give me something real. And they chose to erase her. Erase me. That night, I made a vow. They took my identity from me at birth. Now, I was going to take everything from them. Not with rage, not with threats, but with precision, strategy, truth. The kind of truth that cracks smiles in half. And I would deliver it not in secret, but in front of the same people who once applauded their lies. I waited exactly 1,095 days from the night of my engagement party to the day I stepped foot back in that city. I came back with a plan, an alias, and a timeline, down to the week, the hour, the seating chart. It started with an invitation. No, not from them. To them. I created a foundation, the Kane Initiative, named it after a woman they'd worked so hard to forget. A nonprofit dedicated to honoring adoption, transparency, and truth in family legacy. I made sure it looked legitimate. Registered the 501c3, created a sleek website, commissioned articles, even got a mid-tier local journalist to write a fluff piece. I played the long game, got former foster kids involved, pulled real stories. By the time the invite hit their mailbox, the buzz had already started. Whispers about a gala, a fundraiser, a night to celebrate truth, healing, and family history. And of course, as one of the city's self-declared champions of family values, my mother had to attend. I saw her RSVP myself, through the back end of the guest registration system I'd built. She even donated $500 in advance. My father followed, naturally. I laughed when I saw his name on the list. Richard and Evelyn Carter, patron sponsors. It was poetic. That night, I wore black. No tie, no smile. My name tag said M. Kane. No one recognized me. The room was full of people who once passed me in church pews, who watched me grow up on school stages, who patted my back at college send-offs. None of them looked twice. Time had thinned my face, sharpened my jaw, aged my eyes. I didn't need disguise. I had absence on my side. The gala took place in the same venue as my engagement party. Same chandeliers, same ivory walls, even the same band, though they'd aged like all of us. A full circle, sewn tight with irony. I waited until dinner was served, until glasses were filled, laughter rippled, forks clinked against plates. Then I walked onto the stage. No announcement, no introduction, just me and a microphone. I cleared my throat. "Thank you all for being here tonight," I said, eyes sweeping the room until I found them. My mother mid-bite. My father, pausing with his wine glass near his lips. I continued. "My name is Michael Kane, and tonight, I'd like to share a story." The room hushed. I had rehearsed this moment for 3 months. But standing there, staring at the very people who had clapped for my humiliation, the words came effortlessly. 3 years ago, at my own engagement party, in this very room, my parents announced to everyone that I was adopted. A murmur broke out. Faces turned. My mother's fork clattered to her plate. They said it like a punchline, like a novelty act. What they didn't say was that for 28 years, they lied to me. That they had letters, photos, a bracelet, a mother's name. I pulled the gold bracelet from my pocket, held it up. This belonged to me, given by Judith Kane, my real mother, the woman who tried to reach me. Silence, tension thick as fog. I locked eyes with my father. They buried her memory. They silenced her. They erased me. And then they packaged me up in a tuxedo and presented me like a trophy in front of you. I heard someone gasp. A whisper. A Oh my God. For 3 years, I vanished. I rebuilt. I learned. I found the truth they tried to drown. And tonight, I'm returning it to you. I turned and clicked a remote. A screen behind me flickered on. Emails, handwritten letters, bank statements, photos, the safe deposit box ID, my mother's signature on an NDA she forced Judith to sign in exchange for a one-time payment. Gasps turned to shouts. My mother stood up, trembling. This is a lie, she snapped. He's confused. Delusional. I faced her. Calm. Cold. Tell them my middle name, I said. Go ahead. Tell them. She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. You can't, because you never gave me one. Judith did. It's in the hospital records you never thought I'd find. I clicked to the next slide. A birth certificate. The original. Not the amended one. You stripped my name. My story. My mother. And you did it while telling everyone you were heroes. My father tried to speak. I held up a hand. No. You don't get to talk now. You talked for nearly 3 decades. Tonight, you listen. The room was dead silent. And then, applause. Soft at first. One person. Then 2. Then a wave. People stood. Cheered. Not for vengeance. For truth. I stepped off the stage, walked right past my parents. My mother's face was pale, hands shaking. My father looked like he was watching a ghost. I leaned in and whispered, "You took my voice once. I just took yours forever." And I walked out. The next morning, the video had over 200,000 views. Someone from the gala had uploaded it. Raw, shaky, uncut, just me on stage, unraveling 3 decades of deceit in front of a room full of people who used to call my parents pillars of the community. By lunchtime, it was on the local news. By dinner, it was trending on Twitter. I didn't post a thing. I didn't have to. The truth was doing exactly what I wanted, echoing louder than any lie they ever told. I sat in a downtown apartment overlooking the city skyline, sipping coffee, watching the destruction unfold from 22 floors above the chaos. My inbox was flooded. Journalists, podcasters, estranged relatives, former classmates who had once laughed at my parents' speeches now writing apologies and asking for interviews. I ignored most of them. The only one I answered was Evelyn. "It's time," I texted. "Drop the files." Within the hour, she published a dossier under her real name. No aliases this time. 40 pages. Everything we'd collected over the past year. Tax fraud, forged adoption papers, bank statements showing hush money sent to Judith Kane's family. Even a falsified will from my late grandfather, written conveniently 6 months before he passed, cutting me out of the estate he once promised was mine by birthright. My parents had built their wealth on manipulation. The foundation, the business, even their charity boards, all wrapped in lies. And now, it was unraveling. Sponsors pulled out. News stations ran exposés. Their accountant resigned. Their church issued a statement distancing from any implication of ethical misconduct. My father's face was on the evening news, looking like a man who just walked through a fire and realized he was made of gasoline. But I wasn't finished. I didn't just want their reputations gone. I wanted them to face every person they'd wronged, publicly. So I organized a second event. I called it a night of truth. Booked the same venue again. This time, the invitation made it clear. Open forum. No scripts. Just facts. I knew they wouldn't come. But the people they heard, they did. Former employees. Family friends. Even Judith's cousin, who flew in from Arizona to speak. The stories were damning. One by one, they stood and recounted betrayals, favoritism, manipulation, stolen inheritances, coercive silence. A woman described how my mother once bullied her out of a community grant so her own friend's daughter could receive it. A man shared how my father blacklisted him after discovering he was gay, ruining his small contracting business over a handshake deal. Every word etched another crack in their legacy. I watched from the side of the stage, not needing to speak. My silence said enough. By the end of the night, there were reporters outside, neighbors whispering, old friends slipping out the back door to avoid cameras. A week later, I filed the lawsuits. One for fraud, one for defamation, one for breach of fiduciary duty. I didn't care if I won all of them. Just the filing alone would freeze their assets. I wanted them cornered. I wanted them broke. I wanted them to learn what it felt like to be stripped of identity, dignity, and support. The same way they left me when I walked out of that engagement party. And then, finally, the message came. A letter. Handwritten. Sloppy. like it had been scribbled in a rush. It was from my mother. Michael, we never thought you would find her. We were scared. We didn't do it out of malice. We did it because we thought it was better this way, that she wasn't stable, that you'd be better off without knowing. We were wrong. We know that now. Please, just talk to us. You don't have to forgive us, but don't destroy what's left. I stared at the paper for a long time. Then I turned it over and wrote one sentence. You destroyed me first. I mailed it back without a return address. That night, I stood in front of Judith Kane's grave for the first time. It was modest, clean, a rose quartz headstone with her name etched in soft curves. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I just placed the bracelet at the base, closed my eyes, and let the wind settle around me like silence finally earned. But I wasn't done. Not yet. 6 months after the night I tore their world apart, my parents were no longer spoken about in the past tense of respect. They were whispered about like a scandalous obituary. Their names, once engraved on gala plaques and foundation walls, had been scraped off, one by one. The lawsuits I filed had detonated like landmines. Their bank accounts were frozen, their homes seized, and their social circle. The same people who toasted their sacrifice for raising me had ghosted them faster than a sinking ship in a lightning storm. The headlines were merciless. Benevolent power couple caught in adoption cover-up and inheritance fraud. Local outlets couldn't get enough of it. Reporters hounded them outside courthouses. Their photos, disheveled, aging, haunted, splashed across websites that once celebrated their charity galas and garden parties. But I didn't celebrate. Not once. Because revenge isn't sweet. It's quiet, heavy, permanent, like sealing a tomb. When I withdrew the final lawsuit, the one that would have publicly auctioned off their last remaining assets, I wasn't offering mercy. I was delivering a verdict. I'd taken everything that mattered. Their money, their name, their legacy. The silence that followed wasn't peace. It was an exhale I'd been holding since the night they turned me into a spectacle under crystal chandeliers. That's when the letter arrived. No return address. Inside, a single photograph. Me, barely a year old, in the arms of a woman whose eyes were unmistakable, soft, defiant, filled with the kind of love you never have to earn. Judith Kane, my mother. On the back, scrawled in fading ink, she came every year. She never stopped trying. I stared at that photo until my hands went numb, until the room blurred, until the rage and grief inside me twisted into something new, something fragile and unspeakably human. I could have wept. I didn't. I drove 5 hours to a small cemetery outside Des Moines, where she had been laid to rest. There was no grand headstone, no marble angel, just a slab of weathered granite, and her name carved with heartbreaking simplicity. Judith Kane, 1965 to 1994. A mother, always. I dropped to my knees in front of it, not out of ceremony, out of gravity. I pulled the bracelet from my coat pocket, the one she gave me at birth, the one they locked away like shame, and laid it gently in the grass beside her name. I found you, I whispered. They tried to erase you, but I found you. The wind whipped around me like an answer. I sat there for hours, numb to the cold, until the sky turned purple and the cemetery lights buzzed awake. That night, I made a promise, not of vengeance, but of remembrance. I wouldn't let her name vanish. I wouldn't let my story end in fire. So I began again. I changed my name, legally, fully. Michael Kane. No more initials to hide behind. No more borrowed last name from a legacy built on deception. I opened a foundation, not one tied to prestige or grants or photo ops. Just real help for real kids aging out of foster care. Children who had been forgotten, discarded, mislabeled. Children like me. I never spoke to my adoptive parents again. I didn't need to. They tried to reach out, once. A handwritten letter that begged, pleaded, said, "We only wanted to protect you." I sent it back with one line scrawled across the bottom. "You didn't protect me. You erased me." That was the last thing I ever said to them. Years later, I stood at a podium, not under crystal lights, not in a tuxedo, but in jeans and a shirt stained from a volunteer food drive. A crowd of teens sat before me, some still raw from the system, some still clutching their past like shrapnel. "You don't owe your pain to silence," I told them. "You don't owe your story to shame." I held up the bracelet. "Someone gave me this before I was taken from her." For years, they told me it didn't matter, that she didn't matter, that I didn't matter. But I do. And so do you. They stood. Every one of them. And I knew, in that moment, that I had not just survived. I had rebuilt, brick by brutal brick. And the house I built, it would never be one my parents could enter again. Because the boy they raised was gone. The man who replaced him made damn sure of it.